Welcome to this week's IG Live. I'm so excited to be talking to debut picture book author Razan Abdin. Some of you may be familiar with her because we just are doing a giveaway with her this week. So make sure you enter that. We're giving away a copy of her new book, Splendidly Sawsan. Hello. And so, hold on, I'll send you an invitation. I want to miss that out. Sorry, are you able to turn sideways?
Oh, yes, my phone is vertical. I thought you said horizontal. I was so proud of myself for doing it the right way.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Well, it's so good to see you again. Like I said, we got to chat a little bit on Tuesday for the giveaway, but now we get to have the real interview, which I'm excited about.
Yes, it's so nice. Thank you for having me.
Well, why don't we jump in and you can introduce yourself and tell us what was your journey into becoming an author?
Yeah, sure. So I know you've already introduced me, but I guess I will say hi there, everyone. I'm Razan Abdin. I am an educator, so I taught early childhood for over 10 years, mostly in Montessori classrooms, but also in Reggio Emilia inspired classrooms as well. And as you mentioned, I'm also the author of the forthcoming picture book, Splendidly Sawsan, which was illustrated by Shahrzad Maydani and will be published by Abrams on September 1st. My journey to becoming an author was definitely not a linear process, even though I've always known that I wanted to be an author. I was more brave to say that out loud when I was younger, I would say. So I wrote stories a lot when I was a child. And then in high school, I was very involved with creative writing. I was the editor of our literary magazine and then went to study in college. However, I was like 9 hours shy of a degree in English and creative writing when I was like, okay, I'm a lousy poet. There's no way this can ever be a sustainable career. I was the baby of my immigrant family, so I had a little leeway in a sense that, like, I never felt pressure that I necessarily had to be a lawyer or a doctor. Like, my parents were very, like, open about me pursuing the creative arts, but I think there was just a point at which I was like, yeah, this isn't happening for me. So I just told myself that I needed to get on a more practical path. So I ended up getting a bachelor's in international studies, and then I thought I'd be like a researcher, a PhD, but I went to visit my niece's Montessori school in St. Louis. I'd never been to a Montessori school or even heard about it. And then when I observed it, I just like went into a hole of research and fell in love with the philosophy and pursued my Montessori teaching certification. Anyway, all that to say, I took a lot of detours, taught young children for 10 years. And I remember being at a bookstore though in 2016, so 10 years ago in San Francisco City Lights, and just looking at all these gorgeous books around me. And I just started crying, and it might sound cheesy. I didn't quite understand what was happening, but I was like, how did I let my dreams get so far away from me, like of being an author? And so it would take me a few more years to act on it. But when I was living in New York City, I did just go out on a whim and take some classes at Gotham Writers Workshop, a personal essay writing class. And then I finally took a children's book writing class that I'd been eyeing for years. And then the rest is history. And I feel like when I learned how to write manuscripts for children in earnest. It was just such a collision of all my interests, like,
Right.
children and early childhood and writing and literature. So I feel really at home in this space, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about like how your journey had a lot of detours, but as you say, it all kind of comes together. It's all related, especially because you've talked about how education and literacy for you see them as social justice issues. And I'm going to ask you this, although we mentioned ahead of time. I know this is a big question and it's too much to really address in this format, but I would just love some of your thoughts about why is it that literacy and education are so linked to liberation? What is the role that literacy can have in social justice?
Yeah, as you said, that is definitely a big question. And I'm sure later I'll be like, oh my gosh, I could have said that so much more eloquently. But I think in essence, it's easier to recognize and challenge systems of power and oppression when folks are literate and when they're equipped with critical thinking skills. So
Mhm.
when people are educated, they're less vulnerable, they're less susceptible to exploitation, and when they're informed, they're more likely to be civically engaged. So many things. I know that sounds really basic, but like when we're able to read, we can consume information widely with a deep understanding. And so I think that makes us as humans dangerous to the status quo and to those systems of power. And I think that's why they're like actively trying to like ban our books right now, because books and information are really powerful.
Mhm.
And I've seen it in so many people's lives. I guess in the best case scenario, education is something people can't take away from you. It really has the power in certain scenarios to like change the trajectory of a whole family. So
Right.
I guess for those reasons and many more, I think that like education and literacy and liberation are just like inextricably linked.
Yeah, I love that. That's very beautifully said, and leads right into your books because your books have such a key role in helping change people's ways of seeing things and thinking about themselves, thinking about their community. So let's jump in and talk about your new book, Splendidly Sawsan. It's already gotten a starred review from Publishers Weekly, so congratulations. And tell us about the book and what was your inspiration for it?
Okay, thank you. For starters, thank you so much for your kind words. Yeah, that was really unexpected and affirming, I'm not going to lie, because this journey is really anxiety inducing, even though I'm grateful beyond measure to have a book being published. It's nerve wracking to have it out in the world and for it to be open to criticism. But anyway, so Splendidly Sawsan, it's a story that follows a lively neurodivergent girl as she navigates some really big feelings and learns some strategies for self control along the way. At its core, I'd like to think that it's a story about affirming others, learning to love yourself, and hosting some whimsical tea parties along the way. So I think you probably know at this point that the book is semi autobiographical, and I definitely did lean into my own experiences navigating neurodivergence. But more broadly, I wrote this story really for any child who, like, for any reason has been made to feel like they're bad or somehow deficient or too little of this or too much of that. So, like, I certainly want all children to feel affirmed by this story, but definitely those children.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's such. I've had a chance to read it. I know it's not quite out yet, but I got to read a copy of it, and it's just a beautiful book. It's a really fun story and very like you said, very affirming and very useful. It has a lot of practical tips. But something that struck me was something you addressed in your author's note, because I also grew up in the South. I'm from North Carolina, and I remember getting those messages that of what it meant to be polite, that you should be quiet, that you should be still, which is so difficult for a lot of kids. I think it was even, I had one teacher, at least one teacher, say that was being ladylike, so there's got
Mhm.
the gender aspect to it also. But you talk about that as being really rooted in ableism, which I hadn't really thought about before. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, there are layers, just like the gender layer that you mentioned as well. But yeah, in Sun, in my author's note, I did sort of name that a lot of our society's ideas of what constitutes polite and normal behavior is steeped in ableism. And I guess I'll start by naming like ableism. I guess we could think of it as like a system that favors able bodied and neurotypical people over those with disabilities. So, yeah, a lot of them. the habits that we think of as polite are very neurotypical habits. So, for example, some neurodivergent people may have difficulty abiding by certain social norms. Like some people may not maintain eye contact, which this is also an interesting one because I guess there's a note also that like not all cultures value eye contact the same way,
Right.
right? That like we
Right.
place a big importance on that in the United States, but that's not like a universally accepted norm. Whereas like maybe looking down is considered uh, like more humble in certain cultures or less aggressive. So I'm also looking at this, I guess, from like a US lens, since this is where the story takes place. Other children may interrupt, like Sosan sometimes does in this story. And I think instead of thinking in such a binary about like, this is what polite people do and this is what impolite good people do, it's like it's so much more nuanced than that. So these behaviors like interrupting, like not being able to sit still, like it doesn't make these children or these people like bad or defective. So I think that we should normalize the fact that like bodies, brains show up in all sorts of ways, right? And that makes the world a more fabulous place to live in. So
Yeah, definitely. Um, you talk about how the book is about navigating neurodivergence, navigating having these big emotions, and a lot of times kids don't necessarily have the vocabulary to talk about that yet, what they're experiencing. And I have to say, one of my favorite characters is I guess like a counselor or a therapist that she visits,
yes.
who is so great, so affirming, but it helps her kind of work through very practical ideas. So how can a book like yours help kids navigate these ideas of being different? Like you said, a lot of it's specifically about being neurodivergent, but really for any kid who feels like they've been made to feel like they're less than or they don't fit in.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really thoughtful question. I hope and I'd like to think that a book like this one will let children know that like being different is not a deficit,
Mm.
right? That it's something to be celebrated. I think one of the ways that this book does that is like Sosun really leans into her unique interests and idiosyncrasies in a way that children are really brave to do, I think. She hosts elaborate tea parties with some unexpected guests. She wears a foxtail wherever she goes. And I got to give credit to the illustrator here because that was actually her idea to like visually showcase how Sosun really feels different than all the other kids. But you'll see in one of the later spreads that the other children are wearing animal costumes as well. So you can spot a lion and a monkey and a dinosaur and other animals as well. And that was really to kind of showcase that like we're all a little wild here, if in our own ways. And I loved that so much. So her art really added just another layer of embracing difference.
I love that detail. I hadn't thought about that, but yes, the illustrations we should mention are just amazing. Of course, she's an award-winning illustrator,
She's
so not
incredible.
surprising. Yeah, she's incredible.
Absolutely.
Um, and like you talked about, the book gives kind of practical advice that also has this really wonderful affirming message. But you said you wanted to make sure that you had a really character driven story that was just enjoyable for kids to read. So, how did you come up with the story for it? Because you have all these great ideas, but then how do you turn that into a story that kids will want to pick up and read over and over?
Yeah. Oh, that's a big question. I would say I feel like it was kind of tricky to do, honestly. I definitely had a lot of help from thoughtful beta readers to my editor, who is obviously immensely helpful in creating the iteration that people are going to read. But the kernel of inspiration of what ultimately became Splendidly Sawsan came to me in 2020. And I envisioned a little girl who just experiences emotions like so deeply and so viscerally that she almost like loses touch with herself in those moments and like doesn't know it how to deal with that sort of loss of control. And even though the theme of this book, or one of the themes, is neurodivergence, I didn't want Sosan's character to be like reduced down to like a list of symptoms or diagnoses, nor did I want it to be a story that was solely about like her perceived shortcomings.
Mm.
So I really wanted to create an image of a three-dimensional person who's curious and kind and magical, but also happens to be experiencing some challenges navigating daily life and school life. So I think it was important to showcase some of her struggles for the sake of like a satisfying narrative arc. But then it was also important to put some of those practical strategies that she was developing to cope with those struggles.
Mhm.
And I tried to balance those things so the story felt realistic and honest, but also affirming and hopeful overall.
Yeah,
Like,
that seems
yes,
like a difficult balance to do, but I think you pull it off really well. But like to have it be affirming, but also like, and here's how you can kind of navigate these things on a day to day, like you said, those really practical tips that you have in there.
yeah. So I will say, one of some early feedback I got from the editorial team at Abrams, who was so extraordinary to work with, was about, was about the resolution coming a little too quickly.
Mm.
So it felt as though it just didn't feel realistic, right?
Mm.
And then when the resolution came, it didn't feel as hard earned. So I had to really work through that.
Mhm.
And hopefully we got it right. But I would definitely say, like most books you read on the shelf, this is many iterations in, right? So this is not what my first draft looked like. And many of the things that the editor suggested, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have thought of that myself. But she definitely helped me shape this into a stronger piece. So shout out to Sarah Sproul at Abrams.
Uh, and one of the things I love about the book is that obviously that it centers this neurodivergent girl who, like you said, is just so vivacious and so colorful and creative. But it's not just about neurodivergence. You also have cultural diversity in there. Why was that important to you to kind of incorporate that as well?
Yeah, so even though Sosun's cultural identity wasn't a central theme of this story, it just felt essential to weave in layers of her Arabness and her Palestinianness. For example, Sosun is sort of like a classic Arabic name that I love. It means lily of the valley, and I love botanical names. And they're just little details, right? It's not a central theme, but she calls her father Baba and not dad, and her favorite dessert is kanafa, even though I'm sure as a Southern girl, she probably loves and appreciates pecan pie as well. But representation really matters, and I hope that Palestinian children get to see themselves depicted in a range of narratives across genres, right? In books that directly address the question of Palestine's, and in other narratives that don't, like this one. So it was, again, just important for me to make it clear that Palestinian, that Sosan is Palestinian and that she's Arab, but that's not what the story is about. Although those books that do address cultural identity directly are so essential, and some of my favorite books out there right now.
Right. It's nice that, like you said, to have a range of where they can see themselves in a range of books. Some that address culture directly, and some where it's just kind of part of the fabric of the story, I guess you could say. I want
Exactly.
to go back to something that you said that I thought was really beautiful. That comes through in the book is this idea that it's not just that Sosan is splendid just as she is, but that we're all better off because she's different, that it
Yeah.
makes the world a much more beautiful place because she's different. Can you talk a little bit about that, and how do you think books like yours help change how we view diversity?
Yeah, this is such a tricky question, and I think my answer to this may have like evolved over the years because now I think diversity, it's just a fact of life, right? It's a reality of the human experience. The world is full of different kinds of people, of different racial and religious and socioeconomic backgrounds, with different family structures and different sexual orientations with varying abilities and disabilities. So and so on. So it's important for children and people of all ages really to both be able to see their respective experiences reflected in books, but also be able to learn about and build empathy for those whose experiences and backgrounds differ from theirs. So like for so long, children's books either featured like white, middle class, able bodied characters or animal protagonists and nothing else. So thankfully that's changing, and children these days have access to much more diverse literature than we did when we were growing up. So that's really heartening to see. And that's obviously one of the reasons why I appreciate the important work that y'all are doing. So yeah, I just think diversity is a fact of life, and it benefits us all to like increase our consciousness and know about experiences that differ from our own.
Yeah, one reason why a book like yours is so important, and so it may be a little early to ask this kind of question because your book hasn't even officially come out yet. You said September 1st, right?
Yes.
So, but I have to ask, do you have other things you're working on or thinking about future projects?
Definitely things I'm thinking about. I would love to be able to continue publishing picture books, and I think that would probably be easier to do if Sawsan is well received by the market. So fingers crossed. I am actively revising another picture book manuscript. It's the story that landed me an agent, but it never sold or hasn't sold yet. Rather, let me reframe that.
Yes, yes.
I'm also plotting another project. It was something that I originally wrote as a middle grade novel. And then when we pitched it to editors, essentially they were like, you didn't nail the age group, and this is like a middle grade novel.
Mm.
I mean, excuse me, a young adult novel that is written for a middle grade
Oh,
audience. And for a while there, I kind of was like defensive, or not defensive rather, but I just felt like, no, this
yeah.
happened to me the summer that I was 12 turning 13, so it must be for middle grade readers. But it turns out the professionals were right, and after a long time away from that, I'm finally starting to plot this novel. It's the only one I've ever written as a young adult novel, so stay tuned with that.
And what is that been like for you to, I mean, that's kind of a big jump to go from picture books to young adult novels. Is it kind of hard
Yeah.
to get into that zone, or what was that like for you?
Yeah, it was different, but not necessarily. There's ways in which picture books can also be almost be more complicated because you are trying to create an entire satisfying narrative arc in like 600 words. So it's
Mhm.
easier almost in some ways when you have 60,000 words. But honestly, writing a novel is something like I never thought I had the like cognitive capacity for. Because like sometimes I have a difficult time. I'm a reader, of course, but like sometimes my attention span, is just a little all over the place. So I certainly didn't think I could write one. But I will say for me, plotting, like I couldn't be a pantser and just like fly by the seat of my pants, but like following a structure and knowing what the next, like all I thought about was how to get my character from point A to point B and then from
Mhm.
point B to point C. And I let my main character surprised me along the way. So it
Mhm.
wasn't like I was married to what I plotted out, but I will say having that structure really helped it not seem so overwhelming to me.
Right, right, because it's such a big project. I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. I mean,
Yes.
first, congratulations on
Thank you so
Splendidly
much.
Sawsan. Yes, and then I can't wait for your future projects as well. It's very exciting.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the important work that you do. To the folks who are listening, thank you for being here. And I know you mentioned it, but don't forget to enter our giveaway. I know we just have a day left on that, right?
Yes, it ends tonight at midnight, so don't miss out. It's so easy to enter, just takes a few minutes, and it's our pinned post here on Instagram. And if you joined us late and missed the beginning of the interview, don't worry, the whole thing will be up on Instagram in a few minutes, and later we will have it on our YouTube channel as well if you prefer to watch there. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful. Take care.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.